We are now going to speak about, we spoke about judges, we spoke about rules to apply, and we're now going to speak about the court system in Egypt. If you have a dispute and you have a problem, where would you go? Which court would you go to? Our courts in Egypt are divided as follows. We have what we call the ordinary courts that cover all matters, except the matters in which the House of Representatives may have special laws giving it to a special court. Let us take an example. For example, in Egypt, all matters go to ordinary courts, except if it is a dispute with the government, it goes to the administrative courts. And if it is a dispute relating to certain laws, it goes to the economic courts. And if it is a dispute relating to terrorism, it may go to the military courts. But ordinary courts take 80% of the cases in Egypt. This 20% is divided among what we call economic courts for certain laws, military courts for terrorism or similar courts, and administrative courts for any dispute where the government is a party and relating to the work of the government. Now, what do the ordinary courts handle? If I am buying a piece of land from someone, it is called a civil matter. It is handled by the ordinary courts. If I am selling corn, if I'm a merchant, have a store and I'm selling corn or selling cars, apply commercial law, we go to commercial courts. If I commit a crime that is not part of what other courts should do, I go to ordinary courts, because crimes, again, are divided. Any problem is divided into parts. Part that includes going to jail and a part that does not include going to jail. Both these two go to the ordinary courts unless the House of Representatives have passed a law giving that specific problem to another specific law, as we said, like administrative courts for matters where the government is a party, or where administrative courts where the government is a party, or for example, terrorism, crimes of terrorism, where you go to military courts and similar courts, or certain economic violations. What do you mean by economic violation? For example, there is a law in Egypt preventing one company from controlling one product. And if one company attempts to control one product, which we call monopoly, then it goes to the economic courts. It is also a crime, and in this case, who handles it? It is the economic courts. So we have to remember, ordinary courts 80%, then 20% goes to different courts, whether it is something criminal which results in going to jail, or a quarrel between two persons that has no crime committed in it that may result to going to jail. Human beings, do you go to one court for one problem? Assume you have a quarrel with your brother, and you go to your mother about the quarrel. She decides something, you don't like it, so you think your father is higher, then you go to your father. If you don't know what result of your father you don't like, and you go also to your grandfather, right? This in courts we call the right of appeal. What is the right of appeal? The right, when you don't like a decision of a judge, to go to a higher court than that judge to decide whether his decision is correct or not. Why do we have that system? Because human beings are human. It is possible for a judge to make a mistake. And in order to ensure, to reduce the possibility of mistake, we have what we call the right of appeal, general, which is I go to a court, I don't like the decision, I am allowed to go to a higher court to appeal that decision, say I don't like it, and even if the decision of the higher court I don't like, I would go to a much higher court. This is what we call the pyramid of, and then when it goes to higher court, that's the end. Whatever that higher court decides is the end. It must be applied. And that leads us to consider what is the pyramid of justice in Egypt. The pyramid of justice in Egypt has on the highest level, let's start down. The pyramid of justice in Egypt have at the beginning something called district courts, and then higher than it some court of first instance. And then, so I have a decision of a district court I don't like, I go to the court of first instance. I have a decision of the court of first instance I don't like, I go to the court of appeal. I have a decision of the court of appeal I don't like, I go to the court of cassation, and that's the end. Whatever the court of cassation decides, we must follow. But I am going to explain to you in detail how does that appeal. How do I go about fighting a judgment that I don't like in district court? How can I appeal? What is the system for appealing to the court of first instance? And then what is the system of appealing the decision of the court of first instance to the court of appeal? And then what is the decision of appealing the decision of the court of appeal to the court of cassation? First level, let's remember the pyramid again. Lowest level of the pyramid, let's remember the pyramid. The pyramid says lowest court, district court. And if I don't like a decision of a district court, I can go and appeal it, say it is wrong in front of the court of first instance. And if I don't like the decision of the court of first instance, I can appeal it and go and say it's wrong in front of the court of appeals. And if I don't like the decision of the court of appeals, I can go and say it's wrong in front of the court of cassation. So our first level of court is district court. Now, should judges give all problems the same level of attention? If two people are quarreling over £1,000, should I deal with a quarrel between two people for £1,000 like I deal with a quarrel between two people or 100 people, with two people for £10 million? No. All what we want is swift justice. So, in order to organize the matter, we have what we call lowest court, which is district court. It is the lowest court. To enter the district court, you must have a dispute less than £5,000. And it only covers civil and commercial matters. What does civil mean? Anything covered under civil law. What does civil law means? It means any matter between two normal people that are not merchants, that are not traders, like you buying a house from your sister, buying an apartment from your father, buying an apartment from someone you don't know. These are all civil matters, and if the value of dispute does not at least exceed £5,000, you go to the district court. Okay. Are crimes, are misdemeanors, what are criminal cases also go to district courts? Criminal cases are divided into three types. Contraventions, mukhalafat, lowest problem, you park a car in a place you should not park. Misdemeanor gunha, which is anything punishable by up to 3 years. Anything which is a contravention, mukhalafa, or a gunha misdemeanor punishable by less than 3 years, by 3 years or less, goes to the district court. And these courts are always available in mostly every governorate in Egypt. And sometimes there are 2 or more district courts in every governorate. What is the difference between a district court and any other type of court? The district court always has one judge. Whether he's decided a criminal matter, which is a contravention or misdemeanor, punishable by less than 3 years. Of course, a misdemeanor is a mukhalfa, is a contravention, which is only payment of money for a criminal violation. All these type of cases, any case in front of a district court, whether civil, commercial, contravention or misdemeanor, is always handled by one judge. Remember, the objective is to get things moving quickly. The amount is small, so you want the process to be much quicker. Again, remember the pyramid. Who's the lowest in the pyramid? District courts, already covered that. Who's higher up than the district courts? Whom do I appeal the district court decision to? When I don't like it, I appeal to the court of first instance. So number 1, courts of first instance are higher than the district court. Number 2, these are the courts that you appeal to. If you don't like a decision of a district court, you appeal it to a court of first instance. So it is a court of appeal for the decisions of a district court. Remember now, let us try and divide the problem. Remember, it's a pyramid, right? Okay. Lower in the pyramid, district courts, first and then higher, first instance court, and then appeal, and then court of cassation. what do these courts try and apply? They try and apply, remember, human beings are fallible. Human beings can make mistakes. So the system that these courts allow is a review twice of the same decision to ensure it is correct. What do we call this? The first review is the first review. And then second review, another second review, and then the third review. Well, who are the courts? For the district court, the first review is for anything less than 5,000. What is the second review? It is the review of the court of first instance of the decision you don't like of the district court. Can you go for a third review? Can you go to the Court of Cassation? Can you go to any other court with regard to a decision from a district court that has been appealed to a first instance court? The answer is definitely small amount. Courts cost money. So should I allow them to do a second review? No, because the amount is 5,000. Courts of first instance, we said, are the court of appeal and the final stage for the decision of district court. But first instance courts are the first decision with regard to any dispute that exceeds 5,000 pounds. Remember, district courts have one judge. First instance courts always have 3 judges. So any decision by a district court can be appealed to a first instance court, and that's the final appeal. And any dispute, 5,000 pounds or more, goes for the first time in front of the first instance court and not in front of the district court. And whether it is criminal, I mean, this covers everything, civil, commercial, and criminal. So if I have a civil or commercial matter or a criminal matter, if I have a civil or commercial matter, less than 5,000 pounds, I go to district court, appeal to the first instance court. If I have a misdemeanor or a contravention, remember misdemeanor is anything punishable by less than 3 years, and a contravention of alpha, which is payment of money, I go to the district court. Where do I appeal a decision I don't like of the first instance court? I appeal it to the, where do I appeal a decision of the district court? I appeal it to the first instance. There is an important issue here to remember, that criminal cases if a district court decides something in a criminal matter, it can be appealed to the first instance court, and if you don't like the decision of first instance court, you can still appeal it to the Court of Cassation, and we will explain what these rules are later on. Courts of appeal, remember the pyramid. What is the laws in the pyramid? District courts, first instance court, and then Court of Appeal, and then Court of Cassation. First district court appeal is with the first instance court. Good. Now, let us talk, if I have a decision 5,000 pounds or exceeds 5,000 pounds, 5,000 pounds or more, where do I go for the first time? Do I go to the district court, or do I go to a first instance court? I go to the first instance court. And if I don't like the decision, this is the first wash, this is the first decision, remember. Anything 5,000 pounds, anything exceeding 5,000 pounds, I was wrong, it is not 5,000 or more. It is any dispute exceeding 5,000 pounds. I go for the first time to the first instance court. I don't like the decision. Where would I appeal it? I appeal it to the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal also has a minimum of 3 judges. Sometimes it has 4, sometimes it has more than 3, sometimes 5. Okay. Now, this covers as what was the first step, first degree for a dispute above 5,000 pounds was the first instance court. What is the second step is I decide to the Court of Appeal. Now, let us cover crimes. Crimes, we spoke about contraventions and misdemeanors. And we said contraventions and misdemeanors are handled by a district court and then appeal to the first instance court. But we also have another type of crime, which is called felony bunha, which is punishable by more than 3 years, including the death sentence and including life imprisonment and including hard labor. Who handles this? Does this crime, that this felony go to the first instance court? No. It goes for the first time in front of the Court of Appeal. And it is, as I said, all Court of Appeal decisions are decided by 3 judges. I have spoken about criminal cases. I said they go in front of the district court if it's a contravention or a felony. Sorry, if it's a contravention or misdemeanor, punishable by 3 years or less. Where do I go? District court. For the first time, where do I appeal that decision? In front of the first district court. But for felonies, which are much higher, punishable by more than 3 years, up to life imprisonment and the death sentence and hard labor, I go for the first time to the Court of Appeal, which is the third on the pyramid. Remember, the pyramid has district court first, first instance court, Court of Appeal, and Court of Cassation. Where do I go with the felony for the first time? I go directly to the Court of Appeal. Question that may arise in your minds. Does the same judge deal with civil matters, commercial matters, and criminal matters? No. We have specialization. So in the district court, we have judges specializing in civil matters, we have judges specializing in commercial matters, and we have judges specializing in criminal matters. So he does handle only criminal, or he does handle only civil, or he does handle only commercial. The same thing applies to the first instance court. Remember we said every court has 3 judges. These 3 judges may either handle criminal matters, which are appeals of contraventions and appeals of misdemeanors, or another 3 different judges handle civil matters, or another 3 different judges handle commercial matters. Remember, my friends, Egypt is 100 million, and we are a highly litigious. Litigious society means we like lawsuits. We have about 4 million lawsuits in Egypt, so we cannot have one judge handling everything. Civil has, within the district court, certain judges. Criminal has, within the district court, certain judges. Commercial has, within the district courts, certain judges. The same thing applies to first instance court, judges covering commercial, specific judges covering civil, specific judges covering criminal. Same thing applies to the Court of Appeal. Certain judges applying civil, dealing with civil matters, another set of judges dealing with commercial matters, and another set of judges dealing with criminal matters. Even in front of the Court of Cassation, which we'll speak about later, we still have judges, specific judges dealing with civil matters, specific judges dealing with commercial matters, and specific judges dealing with criminal matters. Again, let us remember the pyramid. District, first instance, Court of Appeal, Court of Cassation. Let us, where did we stop in our last slide? We stopped at the Court of Appeal. Okay. What does the Court of Appeal do? Let us remember. If you do not like a decision of a first instance court, you would go to the Court of Appeal in civil and commercial matter. Felonies is something else. So what happens if I don't like a decision by the Court of Appeal? Where would I go? I go to the highest court of the land, which is the Court of Cassation. Now, what is the role of the Court of Cassation? Its role is to ensure that the law is properly applied. Let us now, in order to fully understand what the Court of Cassation does, let us consider a case. We will consider all cases, but let us start with the simplest one. I have a case in front of the district court. Mahmoud bought a pen from Muhammad for 200 pounds. Muhammad did not pay him, so where would they go, my friends? They would go to the district court. What would the district court do? First, the judge would listen to the facts and then apply the law. First, he has to understand what happened, and then he asks them to tell them what's happened, and then he applies the law. Assume they did not like the decision of this court, where would they go? They go to the first instance court. What does the first instance court? Here is them once more. Remember, this is a complete rehearsal of the case once more. both parties have to come in, both parties have to prove their case, both parties have to explain the facts, and both parties have to indicate how the law is applied. As if there was no decision by the district court. What do we call? What do we call understanding the facts? We call it a court of fact. So district court is a court of fact, and when it applies the law, it is a court of law. So district court is a court of fact and law. And the first instance court is again a court of fact and law, where everything is done all over again. The case is proven. The judge listens to the witnesses. He evaluates their testimony and then decides what the law should be applied. And whether the decision of the district court was correct or not, and if he doesn't like the decision of the district court, he can decide another in a totally different way. He's not committed to whatever the district court decides. Fine. This is for disputes £5,000 or less than £5,000. Let's go now to decisions in civil and commercial matters. Civil, not felonies. Now I have a problem, £100,000. Mahmoud and Ahmed, he bought his car for £80,000 from him, and he did not pay. Where would they go for the first time? First review. Where would it be? First instance court. What does the first instance court? It listens to the facts. It hears witnesses. It sees what happens. Looks at the documents. What do we call this? A court of fact. Why do we call it a fact? Because it has to establish the facts first. And then it becomes a court of law in which it has to interpret the law. I don't like the decision of the first instance court for dispute exceeding £5,000. Where would I go? I would go to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal hears the case from zero. It listens to the witnesses, it establishes the facts, court of fact, and it applies the law, and it is a court of law. Now, I don't like the decision of the Court of Appeal for a dispute of more than £5,000. Where would I go? To the Court of Cassation? Where would I go? To the Court of Cassation. In this case, the Court of Cassation does not hear witnesses or review the facts. It only reviews how the Court of Appeal applied the law on the facts. So it is what we call only a court of law. It doesn't care about the facts at all. It just sees whether the Court of Appeal, as it said the facts were, applied the law correctly or not. So if the Court of Appeal says that Mahmoud sold Ahmed the pen and did not pay him, and the law is, in this case, that he must return, he must pay him, what the Court of Cassation would review would the law only whether the Court of Appeal decided that the money should be refunded or not based on those facts. But again, remember, very critical to remember, Court of Cassation is a court of law only, and it is not a court of facts. It only reviews how the law is applied. What is the role of the Court of Cassation? Remember at the beginning of this slide I said, it ensures that the judges in the Court of Appeal have properly applied the law to the facts. It's not review the facts. It only ensures that the law was properly applied to the facts. Our next slide deals with how does the Court of Cassation work? What does it do? How does it make sure that the Court of Appeal properly applied the facts? In this case, when a case comes to the Court of Cassation, it has two options. Option one is to say that the Court of Appeal has properly applied the facts. And in this case, the appeal to the Court of Cassation, the appeal of the decision of the Court of Appeal to the Court of Cassation is rejected, is refused. What do we call the appeal? What do you call the appeal of the decision of the Court of Cassation? Sorry, what do you call the appeal of the decision of the Court of Appeal to the Court of Cassation? We call it recourse to the Court of Cassation. Different name, but recourse here means the appeal of the decision of the Court of Appeal to the Court of Cassation. Now, assume the case comes to the Court of Cassation. It doesn't review the facts. Remember, never review the facts. It reviews how the law is applied and discovers that the law was wrongly applied. Does it decide the case? No. It returns the case once more to the Court of Appeal to be decided again, taking into consideration the comments that the Court of Cassation has said. Question: does it return it to the same three judges in the Court of Appeal who rendered the first decision? No. It must go to three different judges to decide the case, to ensure that the case is dealt with in a neutral, muhayda, and impartial manner. Question: when the case goes back to the Court of Appeal with three new different judges, are they supposed to follow the comments of the Court of Cassation? Definitely, they are supposed to follow the comments of the Court of Cassation. What is important to remember here, that with regard, remember, felonies, where do I go for the first time? In felonies, I go for the first time to the Court of Appeal. I don't go to the first instance court. What is a felony? Anything punishable by more than 3 years and life sentence, life imprisonment, life labor. What is the next level? What is the next wash? What is the next review for a felony? It is directly the Court of Cassation. And in this case, the Court of Cassation also only reviews the facts and, only reviews the law and does not review the fact. I repeat, if a felony is decided by the Court of Appeal for the first time, you remember, because that's the first time it comes to a court, you can appeal it to the Court of Cassation, but in the Court of Cassation there remains the same. It only reviews how the law is applied. It does not review how the facts have been how the facts have been deduced. How did the court understand the facts? None of its business. It is only a court of law. What does this really mean? It really means, do I have 3 levels for felonies? I'm sorry to say no. For felonies, we have only 2 levels. Not even, but the second level for a felony is a review of the law alone to ensure that the law was properly applied. And this is the real difference between civil and commercial matters. When civil and commercial matters come to the Court of Cassation, they have done first the first instance court, then the Court of Appeal, then the Court of Cassation. First instance was Court of Fact and Law, Court of Appeal, Court of Fact and Law, and Court of Cassation, Court of Law only. It reviews how the law has been applied. But in a felony case, the Court of Appeal is the first review. It reviews facts and laws, fact and how the law is applied, so it's a Court of Fact and a Court of Law. And when it goes to the Court of Cassation, the Court of Cassation, as I said for the 100th time, is a court of law only. It sees whether either it rejects the appeal with regard to the felony, or if it accepts it, it says the decision of the Court of Appeal was wrong, and it must be changed, and sends it back to the Court of Appeal to be decided by 3 different judges. But these 3 different judges are obliged to follow the comments of the Court of Cassation. Because when the Court of Cassation says it doesn't like the decision of the Court of Appeal, it say why. And this why has to be taken care by the 3 judges, new judges. What do we call a court in Egypt? We call it a circuit. Any 3 judges in Egypt, when you file a lawsuit, you file it in front of the circuit. What is a circuit? A circuit is the number of judges. In district courts, we have 1 judge, which is a circuit. In first instance court, we have 3 judges. This is a circuit. In Court of Appeal, we have 3 or more judges. This is circuit. And Court of Cassation also, we have 3 or more judges. What is called the circuit. You remember when I started this lecture, I spoke about courts in Egypt, and I said, okay, 80% of the cases go to ordinary courts, and 20%, the remaining 20% goes to other courts. These other courts are special courts. What I spoke about in the previous slides was how the ordinary courts work. Now we're going to talk about the 20% that is left from the 100% that other special courts or other special courts have. The first and most important special court in my mind is the economic court. It's handled by law number 120 of 2008. What is the purpose of the economic courts? They discovered that a lot of courts in Egypt take a long time to take any decision. And as a result, it was affecting commerce, because if you're a merchant, if you're a merchant doing business, or a businessman, you want the results quickly. You can't wait for 12 years. Some cases take more than 22 years. You don't want to wait for 22 years for the decision to be rendered. It affects how the business is run. And the government wanted to encourage how business works. So they came up with a special law dealing with economic courts. What is the economic court? What they did was they chose 3 or 4 different laws that were part of the ordinary court. So before, when you had a problem in any of these laws, you would go to the ordinary courts. Instead, they moved any problem relating to these 4 or 5 laws to the economic court. So if I have a problem relating to any of those 4 or 5 laws, I would go directly to the economic court. And the economic court has a pyramid. Has a first instance, first level, has a court of appeal, and again, if you don't like the decision of first instance economic court, you go to the court of appeal. The first instance economic court is a court of fact and law. It reviews the facts and applies the law. The court of appeal of the economic court is a court of fact and law. It looks at the facts, establishes the facts, and then applies the law. And then when you go to the court of cassation, it only reviews the law. And then, remember, here's the difference. And when it is decided by the Court of and when the Court of Cassation says that the challenge, accept the challenge, so the Court of Cassation, when it gets an appeal, when someone does not like a decision of the Court of Appeal and sends it to the Court of Cassation, the Court of Cassation has 2 options: either to reject the appeal or to decide the case. So, in this case, when it decides the case, it is a court of fact and law. Let us try and distinguish between 2 things. What I forgot to tell you in the previous slide is a very important question. I am a decision of an ordinary court. I went to the first instance court, I don't like it. First instance court, court of fact and law. I don't like it. I go to the court of appeal, court of fact and law. And then I go to the court of cassation, court of law. But what happens when I go to the court of cassation? Assume the court of cassation says there was a mistake and sends the decision back to the court of appeal. The court of appeal takes a decision. That new decision is still, you can appeal it again to the court of cassation. What happens at the court of cassation this time? Is it a court of fact only? Sorry, is it a court of law only or not? When? Okay, let's start again, remind you of the example. First instance court, fact and law. I don't like the decision, I go to court of appeal, court of fact and law. I don't like the decision, I go to the court of cassation, court of law. Court of cassation says the decision is wrong, sends it back to the court of appeal. Court of appeal in this case is a court of fact and law and has to decide, taking into consideration the comments of the court of cassation. The parties do not like the decision of the court of appeal the second time. Can they appeal to the court of cassation? Yes. The court of cassation this way has 2 options. Option number 1 is to say the decision of the court of appeal is correct. In this case, it acts as a court of law only. Now, what happens if it says the decision is wrong? If it says it has reviewed the law and the law has been misapplied by the court of appeal, should it return it back to the court of appeal? This is a game of tennis. We can keep playing tennis forever. Court of cassation, court of appeal, court of cassation, court of appeal. No. In this scenario, the second time the case goes to the court of cassation, and the court of cassation reviews it from the stand of law and decides there was a mistake, the court of appeal is also obliged to decide the case again, both on fact and law, and the decision is final. So what happens in this case? The file comes in, I am the court of cassation, I review the law, I find out the law was properly applied, so the appeal is rejected. What happens if I discover that the law was misapplied? I say the law is misapplied, and then I, as a court of cassation, become a court of appeal to finalize the case, and I look at the facts, I establish the facts, and apply the law. And my decision as a court of cassation is final and non-appealable. Why do we have this system? In order to close the system. Now, going back to the economic courts, what happens in the case of the economic courts? We have a first instance, then I go to the court of appeal. I don't like the decision, I go to the court of cassation. When it goes to the court of cassation, first it reviews the law. and if it finds the decision correct, it rejects the appeal. And if it finds the decision was not correct, it acts itself as a court of appeal. It establishes the facts and decides the law, and decision is final. So what is the real difference between the ordinary course and the economic course in this matter? In the ordinary course, the first time you go to the Court of Appeal of Cassation, you go back to the Court of Appeal. And then the second time you go to Court of Cassation, it must decide. While in the economic courts, you go back, you go to the Court of Cassation first time, and if the Court of Cassation sees there is a problem in applying the law, it acts as a normal court of fact and law. Now, as we said, in economic courts, we have first instance and we have an economic court. Also, cases in which the dispute is all cases in front of the economic court, as I said, are three levels. First instance, appeal, and cassation. But this is only for disputes less than £5 million. If the dispute is more than £5 million, you go directly to the Court of Appeal of the Economic Court. So, if my dispute in the Economic Court is less than £5,000, I go to the first instance, first review, second review, Court of Appeal, and then third review, Court of Cassation. If my dispute is more than 5,000, I go directly to the Court of Appeal. That is my first review, similar to the felony. Remember the felonies? Well, we go to the first Court of Appeal directly. And then my only appeal is in front of the Court of Cassation. My second appeal, my only appeal to the decision of the Court of Appeal, which is the first court I enter to if my dispute is more than £5,000, is the Court of Cassation. So what we're trying to say here, if your dispute is more than £5,000, you go directly to Court of Appeal and one review to Court of Cassation. When it gets to the Court of Cassation, it is reviewed as, it reviews at the Court of Law. If it rejects the appeal, the case ends and says the decision of the Court of Appeal was correct. If it accepts and says there was a mistake in applying the law, that Court of Cassation acts as both court of fact and the law. Again, let us talk about courts in detail. We said ordinary courts 80%, there is 20% dispute other courts. The first court we spoke about was the economic court. The second is what we call the Supreme Constitutional Court. What is the Supreme Constitutional Court? Remember, we have a constitution, right? Which is the basic legislation. That constitution has to be interpreted. What happens if they make mistakes in interpreting the constitution? The only court they can go to is the Constitutional Court. What is the role of the Constitutional Court as a result? It is to control how the Constitution is applied. How does it do that? It reviews how the Constitution is applied, the regulations applying it, and the laws applying the Constitution. Let's take an example. You remember we said that every ordinary legislation passed by the House of Representatives must abide by the basic legislation, which is the Constitution. What happens if Parliament makes a mistake? What happens if Parliament passes a legislation, an ordinary legislation, that is contrary to the basic legislation? Where would I go with that law that I don't like? Will I go to the normal courts? No, we have a special court, which is the Supreme Constitutional Court, to ensure that the Constitution is properly applied, and more importantly, to ensure that the laws in Egypt, whether basic legislation or any type of legislation less than the basic, to ensure that all laws in Egypt that are less than the basic legislation, less than the Constitution, are applied correctly. So what does that mean? If Parliament, again, makes a mistake, assume they pass an ordinary legislation that is contrary to the Constitution. Assume the Constitution says free education for all. And then the Parliament passes a law saying you have to pay £10,000 to enter school. This is a violation of the Constitution. Where would you complain to? Would you complain about the violation of the parliament to the ordinary court? No. Or to the economic courts? No. You would complain, you would file a lawsuit in front of the Constitutional Court, telling the Constitutional Court that Parliament has made a mistake in acting an ordinary legislation that is contrary to the basic legislation. So this is what we mean by the Supreme Court controlling how the Constitution is applied, or how the Constitution is complied with. Question: do we have 3 degrees? Do we have a pyramid in the Court of Constitution? Do we have a pyramid in the Supreme Constitutional Court? The answer is definitely not. It is a court of one step only. You file the lawsuit, the decision is taken, and then we will talk in the next slide about how these decisions are applied. In the last slide, we spoke about the Constitutional Court. It is the court where you go to if there is a violation of the Constitution, or what does a violation of the Constitution means if the Constitution is misapplied, and how is the Constitution misapplied if they pass an ordinary legislation that is contrary to the Constitution, which is a basic legislation. How does it work? For example, I assume there is a problem. Parliament made a mistake in making a legislation that is contrary to the Constitution. What happens in this case? A case is filed in front of the Supreme Constitutional Court, and if the Supreme Constitutional Court decides that that legislation made by the House of Representatives was wrong in any way, this decision is published. You remember the Official Gazette, where we publish the laws? That decision is published in the Official Gazette and is applied by all government departments. So, for example, if the case was filed that the government is enacting asking amounts from schools that is contrary to the Constitution, because the Constitution says no fees, free education for all. And a case is filed, and then the Supreme Constitutional Court decides that that law was contrary to the Constitution and should not be applied. That decision is published in the Official Gazette, and within 15 days is applied by all departments in the country. All Ministry of Education schools would stop collecting money. Remember, what are we talking about here? Remember, decisions of ordinary courts, decision of the economic courts, are all decisions to the parties. You remember we spoke about this, the 2 parties. The decision of the court applies only to the 2 parties in the case, or the 3 parties, whatever number of parties are in the case. Here in front of the Constitutional Court, it's much different, because it deals with a much bigger problem, which is violation of our Constitution, which is passing a law by the House of Representatives that violates the Constitution. So this case, it is published in the Official Gazette, and it is applied by everyone. Whether he is in the lawsuit or not, he must comply with that Supreme Constitutional Court decision within 15 days of its publication. And also the courts must apply. Assume, for example, the problem does not relate to a law passed by the House of Representatives contrary to the Constitution. Assume the article relates to an interpretation of any law. Assume there is a dispute regarding the interpretation of any law in relation to the Constitution. Now, who's responsible for controlling, making sure that the interpretation is correct? The Constitutional Court. They are calling about the interpretation of a law in accordance to the Constitution. Where does it go? It goes to the Supreme Constitutional Court. Now, assume the Supreme Constitutional Court said that law violates the Constitution, should not be applied because it violates the Constitution. Even the courts, after 15 days, are supposed to apply the decision of the Constitutional Court. Not only the government department. Let's take, for example, the example I gave about the Constitution says no fees for free education, no fees for entering school. And the government is charging in its schools £10,000. And the Supreme Court comes in and says, this law is contrary to the Constitution, therefore should not be applied. What happens? If I'm going tomorrow to school to put my son in, they cannot ask me to pay the 10,000. Okay. But what happens if I paid 10,000 last week and I sued the government? Assume someone sued the government to get back the 10,000 pounds. The court is obliged to apply the decision of the Court of Cassation and return it and order the government to return the money again to the party that paid the 10,000 that was cancelled by the Supreme Constitutional Court. Again, I remind you of what I said at the beginning of lecture. Courts in Egypt. Courts in Egypt are divided into ordinary courts 80%, and then there is a 20% going to other courts. We sometimes call them special courts. The first special court I dealt with is the Economic Court. The second special court I dealt with is Constitutional Court relating to matters of the Constitution or interpretation of the law. The third one is what we call administrative courts. Remember, the government is a strong opponent. Anyone suing the government is always at a disadvantage. So to protect people suing the government and to protect also the government, they established what we call the administrative courts, المحاكم الإدارية, which is part of the Egyptian Council of State. What is the objective of the administrative courts? It handles only disputes in which the government as a public authority is a party. What does it mean, the government as a public authority is a party? It means when the government doing its duties towards the people. For example, when you supply electricity to people, you're a public. When the government supplies electricity to the people, it's a public authority. When the government supplies water, it is a public authority. When the government builds bridges, it's a public authority. So if you have a dispute relating to the government acting as a public authority, you go to the administrative court. But for example, if the government owns a company that sells Mercedes cars for profit, is that part of its role as an authority? That is not correct. So in this case, any dispute with the dealership owned by the government to sell Mercedes cars would be considered, would go to the ordinary courts or the economic courts, but would not go to the administrative court. But the government building a bridge, and I am the contractor, have a quarrel about my fees, where would I go? I will go to the administrative court. If I'm building a road, I'm the contractor, where would I go? More importantly, if I am an employee of the government, and they haven't paid my salary, where would I go? I would go to the administrative court. If I'm a police officer, and my salary does not come through, or I'm fired by the government, whom do I complain to? I complain to the administrative court. So, examples of problem. Any problem relating to my salary as a governmental and a public employee. So if I work for the Ministry of Education as a teacher, this is part of the service of the government, I will go to the administrative court. If I am a police officer and they stop paying my pension, where would I go? I would go to the administrative court. If I'm supposed to get a bonus from the government when I'm working as a police officer, or working as a teacher, or working as a professor at the university, where would I go? I will go to the administrative court. If, for example, I don't show up for work as a police officer and they decide to deduct 2 days from my salary and I don't like it, discipline me. Discipline means Discipline means I made a mistake and they decided to punish me for my mistake. And if I don't like the mistake and I'm working for a public authority, the government, whom would I complain to? I would complain to the administrative courts. So basically, the administrative court is there for anyone having a problem with the government when the problem is government is acting as a public authority for the interest of the people. Army, schools, public schools, universities, public universities owned by the government, Ministry of Finance. If I have a problem with tax, where would I go? The administrative courts, because it's a dispute with the government. So anything which is a dispute with the government, I go to the administrative courts. And the administrative courts are 3 levels. Sorry, are 2 levels. We have the administrative courts, which are the first step when you have a complaint. And we have also the level of appeal, which is the Supreme Constitutional Court. So if I have a dispute, I go to the administrative court first, and then if I don't like the decision, I go to the Supreme Administrative Court as a second appeal. Do we have a third level? No. The first level, it's called directly the administrative court. The administrative court is the first level. It is a court of fact and law. And if I don't like his decision, where would I go? I would go to the Supreme Administrative Court, which is also a court of fact and law. And the decision of the Supreme Administrative Court is final. It cannot be appealed to anyone. So look, in ordinary courts, in some cases, we have three levels. First instance, appeal, and then cassation, while and the first instance is fact and law, appeal is fact and law, cassation is law only, and only becomes fact and law the second time the file comes to it. Now here, in front of the administrative court, the problem is totally different. You go only to, first you go to the administrative court, and if you don't like the result, it is a court of fact and law. If you don't like the result, you go to the Supreme Administrative Court, which is also a court of fact and law, and decision is final. Why do we have only two steps instead of three? Because this is trying to make life easier for people dealing with the government. I have dealt in the previous slide by explaining to you that the administrative courts have two levels. Now, let us be more specific. What do we mean by two levels? You know, you can't have one court dealing with every type of problem. I mean, if it's a problem with salaries, it is different than a problem with a construction bridge that there is a problem with. So we have different courts within the administrative court. If I have a problem relating to my salary or to a discipline, or I would discipline, for example, I did not come to work, so they canceled 3 days, which court, which specific court in the administrative court I would go to? I would go to the disciplinary court. And if I don't like the decision of the disciplinary court, again, the disciplinary court, as far as discipline, as far as salaries, as far as mistakes I have done, as far as non-payment of bonuses, is the first court. It is a court of fact and law. And then if I don't like the decision, I will go to the administrative court, which in this case is a court of appeal, again, of fact and law, and that is the end. I cannot go any higher. Remember what I said, Council of State only has two levels, two levels, not three like ordinary courts. Now, if I have a problem relating, for example, to a contract that I sign with the government. I am a contractor, remember, I am building the bridge over the Nile, and they are not paying the amounts they should owe me. Again, it's a quarrel with the government as a public authority because it's obliged to make roads and to make bridges. Where would I go? I go to the Court of Administrative Jurisprudence, and it is a court of fact and law. And if I don't like the results of the Court of Administrative Jurisprudence in this matter, I go to the Supreme Administrative Court, which is again a court of fact and law, and that's it. Remember, the difference between this slide and the slide before it, I was explaining to you the system. The system is, in everything relating to the Council of State, only two levels. First court, fact and law. Second court, fact and law. And that's the end. No further review or appeal. So, for disciplinary matters, I go to disciplinary courts. I don't like it, I go to the administrative courts. Disciplinary court, fact and law. Administrative court, fact and law, and its decision is fine. If I have a problem relating to bridges or the government acting as a public authority, building bridges, roads, I mean, there is a division, and we're not going to waste your time. There is a detailed division in which tell you when would you go to disciplinary court and when would you go to the Court of Administrative Jurisprudence. So if it's a problem relating to construction of a bridge or a road, I would go to the Court of Administrative Jurisprudence. It is a court of fact and law. It reviews the facts, evaluates the facts, and applies law. If I don't like the decision, I have only one review process, which is go to the Supreme Administrative Court, and in this case, it reviews the facts again as if they were not reviewed before, and it decides what law to apply. The same thing happens with the disciplinary court. If I go to the disciplinary court, it's a court of fact and law. It reviews the facts and decides what law to apply. I don't like the decision, I go to the administrative court. The administrative court listens to the facts again, establishes the facts again, and decides what the law is, irrespective of what the court before it decided. Or simply say that the court before it decided was correct. Same thing happens if I file the case in front of the Court of Administrative Jurisprudence, and I got a decision I did not like. The Supreme Administrative Court reviews the facts and applies the law, and it may say that the decision of the Court of Administrative Jurisprudence was correct, or it may say it was wrong, and then decides what should be the ruling. And in this scenario, this is the final decision. There is no further review after the Supreme Administrative Court, and there is no further review after the Administrative Court if the case is coming from the disciplinary courts.